All right, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. All right, I've got some due dates to go over with you, or some information to go over with you before we get into the artworks. Okay, as you guys remember from last semester, we have notes and sketches for Unit 1, so make sure you are working on those. The notes are during lectures. Make sure you do your sketches. um, Soft Chalks will open up when D2L opens up for you. I think that'll be on Monday. So start doing your soft chalks. In fact, I'm going to do something different this semester with soft chalks. When we are working in Unit 1, I'm going to turn all the Unit 1 soft chalks to zeros. And as you do them, the zeros will be replaced with whatever grade you get. So hopefully that will motivate you for getting them done sooner rather than later. Right, getting them done while we're working on the topic of the soft chalks. All right, detailed drawing for Unit 1, so don't forget about that. You can get started on that, and there will be an article due for the Unit 1. All right, so for the beast, I gave you the due dates for that, so check your due dates, get your assignments for the beast done by the due dates, turn them in by the due dates. That is a little bit more independent this semester. All right. So choose an artwork is due, I think, today, right? I looked at fifth period. 4 people turned in their choose an artwork assignment. Only one of them did it correctly. So there's instructions and an example in the Beast folder in Schoology. So go by that example that I have for you, all right, to turn it in. All right, library assignment, do not put this off. I cannot stress this enough. Go now. You have a weekend coming up, you have another week, and then another weekend, and go to the library, get online with the library, find a book, have them hold it, go and pick it up. Do not wait until the end. You got maps coming up, and you have an article assignment coming up. So just be aware of the due dates. Soft chalks I just talked about. New for this semester. So there's going to be a textbook reading and pop quizzes rather regularly. So let me explain the textbook reading. By the way, everybody, write that down. 20-11A. I'm assigning this to you right now. 20-11A. What do you think 20 refers to? The chapter number. All right, so I'm going to escape out of this. I'm going to go into the textbook. So here we are with the textbook. We got all the chapters. Go to chapter 20. And a lot of these readings I am pulling from the bonus image essays right here. So, you click on chapter 20 and that'll take you to the actual chapter. Underneath, there are bonus essays. And you find the one that says 2011A. You click on that. There's an artwork and 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. That's what I want you to read. When you come in on Monday, and I know Miss Grigg will have different, she's going to do this differently, but for my classes here at Falls, when you come in on Monday, you will pick up a little quiz, and it's going to ask you the artist, the title, the date, and the style. You need to be able to identify it. And then give me 2 things you learned from the reading. 3 paragraphs. All right. Easy peasy. All right. This will be one. I will do this once per chapter. All right. Any questions about that? I haven't figured out yet what kind of a grade this will be, but all right. Let's get into some art. Where do we leave off? Say it louder. Okay. All right, so if you look at this map of the world, where is the Holy Roman Empire? What continent is it in? Yeah, it'd be Europe, right? And if you look at Europe, about what area would the Holy Roman Empire be in? I heard somebody say it. I heard somebody say Germany, right? Basically, when you hear the words Holy Roman Empire, just think to yourself Germany. And I still haven't fixed the map because I have France located. All right, so, but ignore that slide. This green area right here is the Holy Roman Empire. So in this chapter, I think we're still in chapter 20. We're looking at the Northern Renaissance, which is all of this up here, which includes France and Germany. And we looked at Flanders and Burgundy and the area between France and Germany. Anyways, I showed you all those videos of the woodcut and the engraving and the etching. The etching is also called intaglio, to show you that there's a whole new era of art making that is coming forth. We're not going to spend too much time on it. I just want you to be aware of it. Here is a picture of a book, and this image right here in the book is a woodcut. Now, it's a multicolored woodcut, and what I think this is all the lines that are in, or all the parts that are in, like the brown or black, that would be the actual woodcut. And then all the parts that are in, like the red and the blue and the green, either that is hand colored, or there's another plate, another like woodcut carving that has only the blue parts raised. And that it is, so that's where the registration comes in. That's important, that the blueprint is in the right place where it prints on there, that it's these little roofs, and the red is in the right place where it prints on top of the roofs. This image of St. Anthony tormented by demons is an engraving. So they took a metal plate, he scratched into it, and they covered it in ink, and they pushed the ink into those scratches, and then they wiped the ink off the surface. It was pressed into paper, and that paper, when it touched the ink, when it was pulled apart, it had that ink on it. I do want to, with these prints, you can either do black or white. There is no variations of gray. So if you can only do, like, imagine like drawing with a pen, a black pen. You can either draw a black line or you don't. There's no gray with a black pen. Does that make sense? All right. So how do you make things look like they're gray? Well, you do like shading with hatching, and that's what they do in these prints. If you look closely to this highly pixelated print, you can see the lines that they made with, there's hatching, and over here is cross hatching. So that's one of the things that one of the tricks that artists use to make things look like they are shaded. All right, now this brings us to the end of chapter 20. Are there any questions about anything that we've discussed so far in chapter 20? All right. We are going to move now into chapter 21. All right, so much art history and never enough time to cover it all. So let's go run through the art museum. We have a new chapter, chapter 21. This is the Quattrocento in Italy. We ended semester one, the first semester in Italy, and we looked at the Duecento. Do you remember what the Duecento meant? 1200s. And then we looked at the Trecento. What did that mean? 1300s. And then now we're in the Quattrocento. That's the 1400s. That's correct. All right, this is a reminder that in your header of the next empty page of your sketchbook, write chapter 21, or you can write 21. You can write Renaissance Italy. You can write Quattrocento. So that when I grade your sketchbooks, that it's easy for me to tell which notes belong with what chapter. This is also a reminder to write the number of this page on your table of contents at the beginning of your sketchbook, and another reminder that to draw 5 sketches per chapter. All right, so if we're going to look at Quattrocento Italy, what country are we going to? All right, yeah, and if you cannot find Italy on a map, I will be at graduation and I will tackle you before you get your diploma, because you will not be worthy of getting a diploma if you cannot find Italy on a map. All right, so everybody knows where Italy is. We spent a lot of time on Italy in the first semester. And if we take a look at Italy, where is Rome in Italy? Yeah, somewhere in the middle is Rome. And then we're going to look for Florence. And Florence is to the north of Italy. Florence is highly important in the Renaissance. So this is what Italy looked like during the Renaissance. Italy was not one whole country. It was a series of city-states. For example, Rome. Rome is now the capital of Italy, but then Rome was a city-state. It's called the Papal States. And so Rome only controlled like this part right here. But we're going to look at Florence, and this is the city-state of Florence. Now, all these city-states were right next to each other. Sometimes they were friendly with each other, and sometimes they were at war with each other. For example, Florence and Milan were often at war with each other. So let's go to Florence. All right, Florence is a very unique unique situation during this era. In most countries, like 99% of countries, you either have a king ruling, or you have an emperor ruling, or one head figure. In Rome, it'll be the Pope. It was ruling. In Florence, they did something different. They had a government that was ruled by the people. That important people in the city of Florence took turns as governors of Florence. So they would be in office for maybe 2 or 3 months, and then other people would come in. So they would go out, and then it would be another person's or another group of people. It would be their turn to be in government for a few months, and then they would go out, and another group of people would come in. And they kept this rotation of people going through the government for the sole reason of stopping corruption. The longer somebody is in office, the more corrupt they become. And kings are very corrupt, popes are very corrupt, and emperors are very corrupt because they love to hold on to that power, and they make it unfair for anybody else. Well, this system, it didn't matter if you were only going to be in office anyway for you a few months anyway, so there was no chance for you to build your power. Like, everybody had the same share, everybody was equal, and that was very unique at the time. Also, it was ruled by merchants. All these people taking their turns through government were merchants. These were people who bought and sold. They had stores, they had banks, they had businesses that they managed. And so these are not like uh, uh, people that spend their whole careers in the government. Um, and there's a lot of wealth in Florence. In fact, that's a complete understatement. Lots of people were very, very rich, and this is unusual for Italy because in Italy, a lot of the other city states in Italy are ruled by the Pope, or they're puppets of the Pope, and so all the power and all the money is with the church. But in Florence, it is with the merchants. They get to keep their money, and they get to spend their money. Now, what did I tell you guys about money? Like once you've paid your bills, like once you have a house and once you have a car, once you can keep the electricity on and you have extra money, what do you buy? You buy art, right? And also buying art is a symbol of wealth. You get to show off your stuff. And I showed it last uh, lecture, or when we looked at Arnold Feeney and his wife. That is a perfect example of showing off your wealth. Is hiring not just an artist, but a very famous artist, and to paint not just you, but all your rich, fancy stuff. So that is kind of what's going on in Florence, but to a much higher level. Not only are they paying for artworks, but they're paying for whole entire buildings to be built as a commission. So that is kind of the situation that is going on with Florence. Also, this wealth is new wealth. So people, their parents would have been poor, and then now they have a business, and now they're rich. So their family does not have the status of a family that's been rich for many generations. So they want to establish that status with throwing their money around. So and doing lots of commissions. It's very common in sports and in music, where somebody comes from a humble beginnings, and then now they're like in NFL or the NBA, and they have tons of money now, and they just buy flashy things. They don't manage their. I don't know if you ever watch like videos. I do, of people that get very rich, and then 5 years later they're very poor. It's the same thing with lottery winners. Lottery winners don't know how to manage their money because they're not used to money, and so they buy flashy things, and then they're out of money. Right, that's it. So that's kind of what's going on with Florence. There's a lot of new wealth. Also, it is the culture of Florence is to give back to the community. There's a rules that you have to do things for the community, or laws that are passed, and that's part of the giving back to the community is hiring artists and commissioning artworks and buildings for the sake of Florence. It is civic pride and the civic duty to give back to the city that is responsible for you being able to get money. And then also, another thing that's going on is all these rich people are trying to outdo each other. So if you commission a work of art, then somebody else wants to do better than you, they're going to commission a bigger work of art. And then the next person's going to want to commission a bigger work of art. If you commission a one-story building, then somebody else is going to commission a two-story building to outdo you. And so they're all trying to outdo each other with how much money they can spend. And the reason I tell you all of this is that this culture really I'm trying to find the words. It plants the seeds for Renaissance to happen. This is the birthplace of Renaissance. And so This is this discussion of Florence that we're talking about the beginnings of Renaissance, and then Renaissance will spread to other places. But it's because of all of these commissions and the lack of a pope commissioning only stuff for the church that creates this community where art is able to absolutely thrive. All right, before we get into any artwork, I do want to talk about the Medici. I want you to know who they are. Let me close the door. All right, the guy up at the top, Giovanni de' Medici. He was the beginning of the Medici family, and he started out with humble beginnings, and I think it was a wool business that he had. He had sheep, and he was able to shear them and make wool. Well, fabric is very popular at the time because everybody needs clothes, and so he did well and he made money, and then he made some investments, and eventually they bought a bank, and then with a bank they were able to lend out money for a profit, and that's able to make them even more money, and their money grew and grew and grew, and they became the richest family in Florence, perhaps Italy, and perhaps richer than the Pope. And at times they had more power than the Pope and kings and queens. So they slowly, through generations, built up their power and their wealth. And their history is full of drama and backstabbing, and their history is basically a soap opera. There are TV shows about the Medici, and it's a very interesting thing. But I tell you about this family because they commission a lot of artworks, and not only just artworks, but artworks by the most famous artists of the day. So we will look at some of that. I just want you to be aware of them. Let's go through some of my notes. They allied with other powerful families. Like I said, they made a fortune in baking, and they were the bankers to the Pope. The Pope borrowed money from them. The French king borrowed money from their bank. So that is huge. They held high positions. Some of them were popes, some of them were dukes, some of them were cardinals. There was even a queen or two. And they got their power in a very sneaky way. It wasn't an overt overthrow of the government. But like I said, in Florence, everybody took their turn in the government. Well, before long, it wasn't it was common for every time there was somebody in office, it was the Medici family and friends of the Medici family that were in office, and they were able to pass laws that benefited the Medici family, which made it more friendly for more Medici to be in power. So eventually, that system that I told you about to keep corruption out got corrupted. And you can thank the Medicis for that. Anyways, they did lots of powerful and political maneuverings and backstabbings. There was assassination attempts on their lives, and it's a whole big thing. But I just want to introduce you to the Medici. All right. This is their crest. So on the left, I want you to draw that picture. All right. It's an oval. Basically, it's a shield with 6 balls on it. And yesterday during 5th period, a couple people snickered when I said balls. And yes, balls meant the same thing in 14th century Renaissance that they do now. All right. And this is not an accident that these balls are on there, because the Medici had a lot of balls to do what they did. Right. Now, there are different philosophies of what these balls symbolize. The one at the top, the blue one with the fleur de lis. Now, fleur de lis is a symbol of what country? France. So, what is a French symbol doing on an Italian family's crest? Well, they loaned money to the French king, and as part of their deal, he allowed them to use the fleur de lis on their family crest, which allowed them to be more, or it gave them more clout. It gave them more power to have the backing of the French king. Also, one of their family became French queen. Anyways, so there's different theories about what these different balls symbolize. Some say that they are pawnbrokers' stacks of coins. Some say that there's a mythology of the Medici that in their mythology there is some story with a giant, and this is the dents on a shield from a giant. These are medicinal pills. They were also involved in medicine. And these, somebody else suggested these are gold. It's gold pressed into balls, which is like a, it's like having, is it bullion, like the big gold bricks? But all right, moving on. So these family crests would be on the corners of buildings that are built by the families. For example, you can tell by this crest that this building was built by the Medici. And then another building might be built by another family, their family crest would be on it. And it got so that this was almost like a, you know, in rough neighborhoods, you have gangs control certain areas. Well, this became almost like that you are in the Medici part of town when all the buildings around you are built by the Medici. So basically, it's the Medici is marking their territory like a dog marks their territory. All right, now I showed you this building last semester. It's a medieval building on the left. It's the Palazzo Vecchio, and it's the main center of government for Florence. It's like City Hall. The Medici built their palace, their home, to look a lot like the Palazzo Vecchio. And that is a very, it's a very narcissistic thing to do. It's the equivalent of, so imagine that your neighbor has a big house, and then they buy the house next door, and then they buy the house next door and level them all and build one big giant house that looks like the White House. Right? What would you think about your neighbor then? So that's kind of what's going on. That's how the Medici kind of work, is that they are showing off not only that they have money, but that they have power. They're making their homes look like official government buildings. Now, the Medici were paranoid of assassination. So they built this elevated walkway from the government, from the basically town hall, the Palazzo Vecchio, back to their home, their palace. And this is called the Vasari Corridor. And you can see it here where there's this bridge going across, and you can see it down in the lower right-hand corner of this this photograph, where people are walking under, and then there's this covered walkway above. This covered walkway above was built for the Medicis so they could walk from their home to the government building without fear of assassination, without having to deal with the regular people. Does that make sense? So that is, and this is it right here. It runs through the city. All right. I want you to know what Renaissance humanism means. I have a difficult time explaining it, and basically how I understand it is that this is it's a time where people are seeing the potential in what they can do. So it's a look at. I'll let this other art historian, explain it better than I can.
Before getting into the
Phones down, eyes up on the screen. Listen.
To deal with Renaissance humanism. Now, Renaissance humanism is a revival in the study of classical antiquity. At first in Italy, and then spreading across Western Europe in the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. This is not modern secular humanism, nor is it a philosophy. And please do not confuse this with secularism, which is a wholly different idea. Humanism was a pervasive cultural mode, and not the program of a small elite. Rather, it's a program to revive the cultural legacy, literary legacy, and moral philosophy of classical antiquity. And we see a return to many of the Greek and Roman ideals, mostly civic and philosophical, not a return to paganism or secularism, more a reconciliation of these classical ideas with the church. Where are these ideas coming from? They aren't digging up manuscripts. What's actually happening is we're going to see that Islam will be slowly conquered in Spain. And there's one city at the center of this, which is Granada. Granada has massive libraries and a great deal of information, books that Islam has translated into Arabic, starting with materials that they got from the Byzantine Empire, some of which were holdovers from ancient Rome. They translate this, they end up in Granada, they end up in Baghdad, or copies that end up in Baghdad. And so as Christianity reconquers Spain and completes the reconquest in 1492, which is going to be important later, but after 1492, they've reconquered all of Spain, which means all of the manuscripts from Granada will be sent to Paris and to Italy, the two centers of learning where we see them translated back into French and Italian, and therefore becoming accessible to the general public. Now, we have other people who are going to play a role here, such as Petrarch. And he comes from Tuscany, and he's devoted, or a devoted classical scholar who's considered the father of humanism, a philosophy that helped spark the Renaissance. Petrarch in his own time was primarily known for his work in discovering and disseminating classical literature, as well as his work in Latin and his imitation of classical literature, such as his letters. He was famous for discovering several texts by Cicero, including letters, and verifying that they were actually written by Cicero. This activity of rediscovering ancient texts, again, those coming primarily from the Islamic world, became the hallmark of humanism throughout the 14th and most of the 15th century. Although Petrarch collected Greek texts, he didn't seem to have read them. So he focuses on rediscovering classical literature, rested firmly on Latin literature. So he's focusing on Roman literature. Of course, the Romans had translated much of Greek literature into their own. And so he can do that. And he's getting it from Islam. He's also getting it from the Byzantine Empire, which still, in some way, exists up until 1453. So let's talk about humanism itself. Humanism is ultimately a way of looking at the world. It's a code of conduct, educational theory, and scholarly discipline, more than a philosophy. It kind of shapes the entire world in which one lives. So let's start with the educational.
Eyes up on the screen.
The humanists believed that students had to master both Latin and Greek, as well as acquire a thorough grounding in the works of Cicero, Plato, and Aristotle. Cicero, a great orator of ancient Rome, Plato and Aristotle, great philosophers of ancient Greece. This would become the model of Renaissance education in the century to follow. They focus on ideas such as eloquence or rhetoric, the ability for a man to persuade a crowd. And they have certain ideals that they focus on. And these ideals apply to everyone, not just in education. For example, self-sacrifice for the state. Well, we do the same thing today. Participation in government. We vote. They would have held large public debates as well as public votes. The defense of state institutions, in their case, even against the church. Because at the time, the church has developed something called the papal states. They have actual territory that they're trying to conquer. The church is also seen as corrupt in this time. We also see a stoic indifference to personal hardship, this sort of idea of the stiff upper lip, someone accepting hardship and simply moving through it, and that being a great positive when looking at their personality. We also see an emphasis on individual contributions, as well as creativity and fame. This is where the cult of fame sort of ideas come from. It actually starts with the Greeks and then gets transferred along with that Greek and Roman knowledge into Renaissance Italy and throughout the Renaissance. And here they're reflecting these ideas in Renaissance art. Things like focusing on human potential, rationality, and achievement. The idea is that God gave free will. God gave rational thought. And therefore, we need to do everything we can to develop those ideas, to develop those skills. Artists will start to take credit for their work. Before this, they had been primarily artisans and craftsmen, sort of like plumbers. They will start to portray known individuals. And they're going to do this in the time that those people live, or very shortly thereafter. Frequently in the form of sculptures of artists and authors, in this case of Dante. We also see a return to classical forms in art, Greek and Roman forms in art, with a redevelopment of realism based on observations of the human body, models, and as we'll see later, dissection. So they're actually going to look at the human form as opposed to sitting there going, well, I know a human has a head and 2 hands and 2 feet and a whole bunch of cloth in between. They're actually going to start looking at the human form. That sense of naturalism, that sense of realism is going to be really incredibly important throughout the Renaissance.
All right, so we are going to get into some sculpture. All right, do you guys remember this cathedral, this domeless cathedral? All right, it still does not have a dome at this time. And but I also want to point out the baptistry down at the bottom. Right, so that baptistry is right outside the front door of the cathedral. There it is. Say that again. At the time, it did not have a dome. This is a photograph of today, or not today, but modern time. It has a dome now. All right, so this is the baptistry, and we left off in the first semester in Trecento, Italy, and I pointed out doors that were made by Pisano, I think his name was. All right, I'm going to pause this. All right, and so this is a 3D camera around. So we're just looking. This person that's filming is walking around the cathedral. So if we can look up, and the cathedral is made of, or the outside has this white marble and this green marble. So one way that you can definitely tell Italian Renaissance or medieval architecture is that it has this white marble with the green geometric lines. So as he turns the corner around the cathedral, you'll be able to see the baptistry. And there it is. So there's doors on 4 sides. It's an octagon. So this door right here would be the west door, because it's facing, yeah, it's the east door. All right, so that gives you a sense of the location of where this is. We are going to move on. Yeah, it's the east door. All right, so this door right here, the doors right here were made in the medieval era by Andrea Pisano. All right. It took him 6 years to make these 28 panels. So to go to the next set of doors, I want you to understand this contest that is about to happen. I want you to know what a guild is. And I think just this last summer, there was a famous guild that was in the news. Do you guys remember at all this summer when the actors were on strike? All right, that was the Screen Actors Guild. So all the actors that went on strike belonged to a club or an entity called the Screen Actors Guild that protects them, helps them find jobs, will have lawyers for them. And so a guild does a couple of things. It teaches you the skill. So this wool guild that we're about to talk about will teach you how to make fabric or make wool from sheep, but it will also protect you when you need it. It can hire lawyers for you if you're being sued, or it can protect you in other. Are we about to go? Yeah, we got 2 minutes. All right, we will stop right here. All right, those are the doors that were done by Pisano. And did you see all the people there, all the tourists? Yeah, that's Florence all the time. All right, so I need to end the video.